I met my shark, I'm not going to say his name, back in 2017, and it was a PIN meeting in Kensington, and Simon Zucchi was in the audience, and this guy stood up and he gave a really convincing presentation, and the audience was absolutely electric. And he was going, he told us about his backstory, and he'd been around the block and he'd had his ups and downs, and so it wasn't all amazing. And anyway, he's like, I'm going to take 2 mentees, but I'm not going to take anyone. I want the right people. And so I was like, I am going to be one of his mentees. So without sort of thinking, do I believe what he says, and is he who he says he is? I was like, I will jump through your hoops. So I jumped and jumped and jumped. And I thought he'd just kind of recognized something special in me, but he probably just recognized that I got a bit of a pot of money. And I was enthusiastic and bought into him. I don't know. He chose me and one other investor. And he basically said, look, I will mentor you, but we're going to do it whereby we find deals and do them together. And I will guide you through that. You bring the money and I'll bring the time and expertise. And I thought, well, what could be better? Sounds like a really good trade. And I started to see how every deal he found seemed to be the deal of the century. And I remember thinking, he's so amazing. And then I went on podcasts, which I've since had to ask the hosts to take down, where I would go, oh my God, this guy can just make deals stack up where nobody else can. And, this is where I was naive. I now know that you get a spreadsheet, you can put any old numbers in and make the deal stack. So my first mistake, I was so excited about working with him, and he was with his other mentees. He was doing a big project where he had forecast the profit to be in the region of £800,000. So he said, listen, there's so much meat on the bone, Claire, you could invest in this. And I'd been doing a lot of work on this project on the planning side. I've really got stuck in. I want to be part of it. I want to learn. He said, listen, it's not fair that you're doing this. You should be getting something back. How about you invest via my company, and then when the project pays out, you can have that part of my profit back. There's plenty of it, so it's fine. And he gave me shares in his company as security, shares in a worthless company. It turns out that 70,000 I handed over for that. And I handed that over before we had any paperwork in place. For him, the paperwork was those shares. And as soon as he'd handed over those shares, he was like, I've done my part. Now you paid me that money. Come on, do it. I was like, okay. Quickly transfer the money. I'm sorry, feeling really bad. And then at the end of it, I said, listen, should we have some legal paperwork here? And he was like, yeah, sort it out. As Helen has explained to me, the borrower should sort out the paperwork and pay for the paperwork. But I had to do it retrospectively. It cost me over £3,000. It took me over a year. And I was basically putting legal agreements in place retrospectively on something where the lawyers couldn't protect me because I'd already lost my power.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I asked that question. Like, it's property. Things go wrong. Things happen. But what I want to know is how you got yourself out of that mess. What did you do? And did you do right by your investors? Ultimately,
absolutely.
What matters to me. So I love this picture that we've used here. It's not the wolf in sheep's clothing, it's the shark in goldfish clothing here.
Yeah, great.
So, as Claire says, when you look at these things with hindsight, they're all kind of obvious. And I think, we can see that when we look at like Ed's guy. They're arrogant, they're narcissistic, they're actually sociopathic, and I've got a great book recommendation for you on that, which I recommend everybody in property read. But what they also are, and this is exactly what Claire has spoken about, they are very, very charming. They are charismatic, they know what to tell, how to talk to you, to push your buttons. They are great readers of people generally, and they know just what to say. They know just your little buttons to push to develop that rapport. I mean, half of them have been kind of NLP trained, which is not a bad thing, but it is if you're going to use it to manipulate people. So, you know, if they were all assholes from day one, then clearly you'd spot them, but they're not. And that's the point, male or female. But if somebody has that charm, has that chat, has that swagger, I have to tell you personally, like, that's one of my alarm bells. It sends me running for the hills, as does a very kind of overly slick and polished social media profile as well. Nobody's life is like that. Nobody's life is like 100% of the time. So there's either an overcompensation going on, or, you know, yeah, it just rings alarm bells. So watch out for that.
Yeah, I think the important part of that as well is that you've got, if it, a bit like what you were saying earlier on, Claire, like it was charismatic and everything like that, and always say, well, the person who's going to rip you off is never going to be an arse. They're never going to come up to you, slap you around the face, and call you everything under the sun. And say, by the way, I don't suppose you want to give me money now, do you? They're always going to seem friendly. They're always going to seem charismatic. Yeah. So the problem is that, and this is why it hits so deeply when things go wrong, is because they don't just take your money, and they don't just take your emotion. They take away your integrity. They take away your trust. That means you start to even distrust others around you, friends and family and everything. And the money is irrelevant to the equation by that point, because money you can always make back. You know, you work hard enough in the McDonald's, you're going to make 100 grand back at some point. But what it does to you as a human being, as a character in the long term, it can really affect you. And I've seen it numerous times where people have done maybe 3 or 4 deals that have worked out. They've tried to do something bigger, problems occur. And then it's not like they go back to stage 0, they go to -10. They don't want to come back to property. They don't trust anybody. They think the world's filled with assholes, and, you know, that's just the way it goes. And it's remarkable how much emotional damage these people do. And because they're narcissistic and because they're sociopathic, they don't care. And they don't have, what's really, really important is that they do not have the capacity to care. So it doesn't matter what you do to them. They will never go, oh, I'm so sorry you taught me. Thank you for dragging me through court. They're never going to care.
They'll probably blame you and tell you it's your fault. Yeah. And that's my book recommendation is The Sociopath Next Door. 4% of the population, that's 1 in 25 people, are sociopaths. I would argue it's much higher in property, and it's definitely higher in investment banking. Yeah. And most normal people, what that book says and helps you understand is most normal people, we can't even begin. You can imagine being blind. You can imagine being an arsehole. You can imagine various kind of states and personality types. It's very difficult for the other 96% of the population to imagine not having a conscience, because you have to think, oh, if I did that, well, I'd feel guilty, but I'd get over it. That guilt doesn't even occur. That's not even a stage in that person's way of thinking. So you know, this is what a true shark is.